Senator Elizabeth Warren is our guest this morning. Let's go on the record. A candidate for re-election this year in an election year like no other. The issues, the high stakes. The senator is in the chair this morning. Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5 anchor Ben Cimino is in the chair this morning. Charmin Sacchetti is off this weekend. As you can see, with us at the table this morning is the state senior U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, first taking office in January of 2013, a candidate, as I said, for re-election this year in 24. Harvard University law professor. She's also taught law at the University of Pennsylvania, holding degrees from University of Houston and Rutgers University. Is it too late to say Happy New Year, or we
nope,
don't?
You can still say
well, Happy New Year then.
Since it's a happy thing.
Good,
you
okay,
can say
good.
In fact, you can say it for another week or two.
Oh, good, okay,
It's
good. Well, Happy New Year.
It's
It's
good.
great to have
Happy New
with
Year
us.
to you,
Great
too.
see
Happy New Year. Good
Happy
morning,
New Year,
Senator.
Ben.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here. Let's start with Israel. It's a
Okay.
nation you've been a strong supporter of. You recently said, though, now that there should be no further U.S. aid to Israel without conditions because of its military actions in Gaza. You've called out Benjamin Netanyahu's government for what you say is an appalling disregard for Palestinian lives. What are the conditions you want to see on U.S. aid? Tell us how you came to this position.
So look, I think that what Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet have done in the prosecution of this war, what they've done in the West Bank, and what they've done in the lead up to this war has been very good for Benjamin Netanyahu and not good for the Israeli people and for Israel and for the region. So here's what I want to see. First of all, I want to see prioritizing getting those hostages back. I think that's absolutely essential. Need to stop the indiscriminate bombing. Need to see an extension of the earlier ceasefire. And most of all, need parties to lead in both places, in Gaza and in Israel, who want to put everyone on a path toward long-term peaceful solution, and that means a two-state solution.
Can that happen with Benjamin Netanyahu as Prime Minister of Israel?
He has made clear that's not where he is. Now, that's why we need to put conditions on our aid. Remember, it is the official policy of the United States of America, two-state solution for the region, two peoples who are treated with respect, with dignity, with security, who are able to live side by side. We need leaders in Israel. We need leaders in Gaza, among the Palestinians, who are going to drive in that direction.
So is one of those conditions an immediate ceasefire on the part of Israel?
I think that Israel needs to extend the ceasefire that was in place earlier, along with the return of the hostages. Those are the two best immediate steps that anyone could take in the region. But like I said, we've all got to keep focus on where we're heading, and that is a two-state solution. Dignity and independence for a Palestinian people who have a right to their own country, independence, security, for an Israeli people who have a right to their own nation.
Item two I want to talk about is Harvard. You have a very close relationship with Harvard. Claudine Gay stepped down as president last week. Did she do the right thing?
No. Look, she made mistakes. I disagree with her on what she said about genocide. She apologized and made the decision to step out of the spotlight here, and I respect the decision. But I want to be clear. The billionaires and the right-wing extremists who really drove this, who really wanted to make this a huge event, these aren't people who care about our academic institutions and how to make them stronger and more independent. These are not people who care about anti-Semitism and how it is that we become a nation that stamps out anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinianism. These are people who have a political agenda, and that's what they're advancing.
So some have called the campaign against her a conservative hit job, or perhaps even worse, a racially motivated hit job. Was it either of those?
Well, do keep in mind that the allegations of the words that were used against her, the threats that were made to her, the racial epithets that were hurled at her are well documented. So I think seeing the racial aspect of this is clear. But I really do see the right wing that led this as it's all about politics. That's what they want. They're looking for to draw blood in what is in effect a social conflict.
I understand what's on the table on that front, the anti-Semitism front. But what about the plagiarism front? What about the attribution front?
as I
A
said,
student does it. You know what happens to a student.
I understand that. And Claudine Gay has apologized. She has resigned. I respect her decision to resign. What I'm concerned about is the idea that a right-wing extremist group, and helped by an important billionaire, decided they were going to drive their agenda, and their agenda has nothing to do with making higher ed a safer place for anyone.
So why was there such a different response in Pennsylvania at Penn? They said very similar things, Claudine Gay and Liz Magill, in that congressional hearing. And yet almost immediately, your Democratic Senate colleagues, Bob Casey and John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, the governor, Democratic governor from Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, essentially called for a change of leadership at Penn almost immediately. Here there was relative silence. Why is that?
You know, I don't know. All I know is that the groups that were leading the charge against Gay had started actually well before October 7th. And so October 7th was an additional log on the fire. But a big part of what was going on here well predated that. So, you know.
Is it time to change how the university's governed?
You know, I don't really think that's the federal government's job. I think it is the job of the universities to work through their own governance structure. And, you know, I really am somebody who believes one of our strengths as a nation is we have a lot of universities that are governed in a lot of different ways, that have a lot of different things that they emphasize as their strengths. There are things they don't do. And I think that is important for universities to work out. Here's what I love about our universities, and here's why I think the right wing really hates them, is that our universities are by and large the place that truly embrace diversity. And when I say diversity, I mean diversity that's racial, I mean diversity by gender, I mean diversity by sexual orientation, but I also mean diversity of thought in a zillion different ways. People who will challenge. That is the primary scientific accepted wisdom right now, but here comes somebody else who wants to go after it and says, I've got information, I've got data, I've got another way to look at this. That's what makes our universities strong. Right now, the universities are the one place where you can have an 18-year-old who grew up in the middle of Iowa as a roommate with an 18-year-old who grew up in the middle of Nigeria. And they learn from each other. That's our universities at their best. Do they have problems? Does it get bumpy? You bet it does. Do they make mistakes? Sometimes they really do. But that's what universities do best. They grow, they change, they listen, they learn. That's what those places
Next
are.
item is the crisis at the border in Mexico. It's not tied directly to the fight over funding the government. And that is all about to come to a head at the Capitol. The state struggling to find shelter space to pay for services. This state, obviously. Governor Healy looking for $1 billion with a B in the year ahead to deal with it all. Washington has not offered much help. Are you doing anything to change that?
Yes. So let me do it at both levels. First is what it is that Congress can do and ought to be doing. Do keep in mind that when President Biden sent over this latest funding proposal that would deal with Ukraine, that would deal with Israel, that would deal with Gaza, he also included in there money to deal with issues at the border and with the cities and states that are now trying to cope and supply help for migrants. The Republicans just no, are all we're hearing from them. And they tell us they want to negotiate and then they move the football. So we're trying to get something where Congress actually puts more money in, more resources in, and some changes in policy. But I want to do the other half.
Is there progress on those negotiations, though, before you move on to the other half? What are you hearing as you head back?
I got to say on this one, my frustration is there's always progress. But none of this counts until you make it across the finish line.
Yeah.
You know, they 10 yards and then it moves back 5 yards and then forward 3. And you got to make it across the finish line. And we haven't even made it across the finish line in the Senate.
So
much
will
less
it make
the
it across
House.
the finish line?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because this is one of those where it takes two to dance here. So we are divided government right now. And the Republicans in the House are saying they don't want to do anything.
And what's the other half?
Yeah,
I interrupt.
So, no, that's okay. The other half is what we can try to do administratively under current law. What I've been pushing on for a year now is to try to get work permits to migrants who are here. Look, right now here in Massachusetts, I talk to employers every day, to restaurant owners and hotel owners and people who run security services and people who run cleaning services.
Need help.
And they want help. I talk to folks in migrant shelters who want to work, who are qualified to work, who are overqualified to work. But without a work permit, the two of them can't come together. I've been working hard. I've been working in concert with Governor Healy, who's done a terrific job on this. We're both pushing. We have some good news to report here, and that is the speed of getting these work permits through is accelerating. And that's powerfully important, because the more people who can get those work permits and get a real paycheck, they don't want to live in those congregate settings.
Right.
They don't want to live in a
Right.
shelter.
Yeah. Right.
They want out of those shelters, even if it means they may have to double up with another family, but they can't do that until they can get a paycheck. And that's what we're working on.